To unpack the legal implications and what this means for electoral credibility, we are now joined by a legal practitioner and public affairs analyst, Abdulkareem Musa. Abdulkareem, always a pleasure. Once again, good to have you here. Thank you for joining. Abdulkareem, so INEC Chairman says the Commission has the capacity to electronically transmit results in 2027, but that he cannot guarantee 100% perfect election. So from your point of view, your legal point of view, how should Nigerians interpret that caveat come 2027?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for having me again. Yeah, the statement of the INEC chairman is only a confirmation of what INEC has always said, and it's quite exciting that at this point, the INEC chairman has come out to reiterate their position that they are capable of transmitting votes electronically. And talking about not being able to guarantee 100% efficiency during the elections or transmission of votes. Now, the law does not even require 100% compliance. The law requires substantial compliance. In an election, nobody needs to have the total number of votes cast to win an election. All you need to have is the majority of lawful votes cast at the polls. By Section 138 of the Electoral Act of 2026, which was previously Section 134, the grounds for complaining in an election are therein stated. And one of the grounds is that the election was not conducted in due compliance with the Electoral Act. And considering the requirement for transmission of votes, those are some of those grounds that issues of compliance may arise. So by that section, in interpreting what compliance with the Electoral Act means, several judicial authorities have defined compliance to mean substantial compliance and not complete compliance. So if the INEC chairman has said that he cannot comply 100%, it is not a problem. We are not expecting 100% compliance. In his latest...
Well, would you say that, Abdulkareem, some people will disagree. Some people will say it seemed like as if he was copping out of the engagement, like as if he was throwing in the towel already. Because how does it affect voter confidence? If I'm not sure that my vote is really going to be transmitted electronically, I would have some skepticism going to the polls now, wouldn't I? So doesn't it sound like he is throwing in that towel and saying, no, we may not be able to do it 100%?
Yes, the apprehension of the Nigerian people is quite understandable at this point. The INEC chairman is a very revered senior advocate of Nigeria. He's aware of the principle of law, that in law you cannot approbate and reprobate. You cannot say that you have the power to do something and turn around to say that you do not have the power to completely do it. That's approbating and reprobating at the same time. The law does not allow that. But then, going beyond the apprehension of the Nigerian people, his statement in the sight of the Nigerian people may seem like a leeway, creating a room to not meet up with the expectations of the Nigerian people, and later on coming to justify his failure to meet up by this statement he's making now. It seems like he's laying a foundation for failure that he would justify later. But we that are aware of the requirements of the law know better than being tricked by the statement that I cannot comply. We may not be able to comply 100%. Nobody is requiring.
Okay, Abdulkareem, let's take a look at the status of electronic transmission currently as we have it in the reform. Does it mean that it is absolute transmission, electronic transmission, or are there still loopholes? Are there still gaps? Is there still an allowance that allows for discretion when it comes to transfer of votes?
There's still a provision that allows for discretion in places that there are no infrastructures to transmit. But the law, the primary law is that votes must be transmitted. But I want to state that the INEC has been handed the power to determine whether the transmission of votes can be compulsory. Because by the provision of Section 150 of the Electoral Act, which was previously 148, INEC has been given the power to make regulations that gives them the ability or the capacity to give full effect to the functions that they have been imposed with under the Electoral Act. And that power to make rules and regulation is what enabled them to make the INEC guideline for conduct of elections. So if INEC, having tested their capacity, knows, like the INEC chairman has declared, that they can transmit votes, they should alter the regulation, because the extant regulation now is the INEC regulations of 2022. They should come up with a new regulation making it explicitly clear that we have the capacity to transmit votes and we are going to transmit votes. And I want to quickly say that the excuse that they may not be able to transmit votes in all areas, that excuse has been tested by the last election not to be substantial or substantive. It's not something that they can hold on to. In the last election, votes were transmitted.
Okay, Abdulkareem, before you go into the last election, still on Amupitan's current statement and how it affects 2027. Now, yes, it seems like talking from both sides. Yes, we can electronically transmit, but no, we cannot guarantee 100%. How does that affect voter confidence at the end of the day? And what must INEC do to boost voter confidence after this statement?
Well, I must say that that goes a long way to affect the confidence of the Nigerian people and the voters. And such statement shouldn't be coming from the INEC chairman, because it erodes the confidence and the trust that the Nigerian people will have in the system. And the greatest weapon of the Nigerian people and the common Nigerian is the votes that they have. And anything that has the capacity to dampen that, the hope that the Nigerian man has that his votes will count, should not be tolerated. So that statement that he may not be able to comply 100% is sufficient to dampen the confidence, the trust that the Nigerian masses would have in the credibility of the outcome of the elections that will be conducted in 2027. So that statement should be retracted by the INEC chairman. His statement should, at this point, be full of hope and courage to the Nigerian people that his tenure will be marked with a free, fair, and credible election that Nigeria has never seen before. It is this kind of comment that can only give, it is only this kind of comment that can give hope to the Nigerian people, not a statement that seems to be reversing on INEC's commitment to a free, fair, and credible election.
Okay, so these things they don't just happen in isolation. You have to look forward and see the implications, especially come 2027 election. With a statement like this, how does it affect post-election litigation in the Nigerian system? We see this happen a lot. But where you have guaranteed transmission 100% and then go back and say we cannot do it 100%, what does it mean for post-election litigation in Nigeria?
Well, the statement of the INEC chairman is inconsequential with regards to election petition tribunals or election petition litigations. So his statement, the comment of the INEC chairman is irrelevant. What is relevant during election petition trials, litigations, is the Electoral Act, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the electoral guidelines. And that is why I'm making a case right now that INEC should review the guideline to address certain key issues that are litigation related, because the argument in the last cycle of election, during the litigation cycle, the Supreme Court held that the INEC regulation did not have the force of law. And in reviewing that decision, I am of the position that the INEC regulation is a subsidiary legislation, and a subsidiary legislation derives its power from the primary legislation, and as such, it should have the force of law. So whatever loophole the Electoral Act may have, they have been handed the power to correct any loophole in the regulation and the guideline for the conduct of elections. And if the INEC rise to the occasion to alter the guideline in order to give effect to the yearnings of the Nigerian people, then we would also call on the judiciary to acknowledge the INEC guideline and regulation as law that
Abdulkareem,
parties can rely on in an election.
Abdulkareem, this will be my last question, and it's a short one. What must INEC do between now and 2027 to be able to regain Nigeria's trust? What must it do tangibly?
Yes, INEC must take time to train its officers, the presiding officers, and all the officers from the polling unit down to the officers that will declare the presidential elections, to conduct and declare the presidential elections. INEC must also take time to review its guidelines to ensure that provisions that affect litigations, and there are several litigations, several provisions. For instance, in the schedule to the Electoral Act, there are provisions there that every witness in an election petition must have a witness statement on oath. That includes witnesses from INEC. A petitioner is required to file an election petition within 14 days after the conduct of election. Within those time, it is not possible to get a staff from INEC to depose to an affidavit to either admit or deny certain acts or conduct in an election. That areas must be reviewed. Either that upon conducting an election, the presiding officers or INEC officers who participated in the conduct of the election must make materials, documents, and statements available to the parties who participated in that election, so that all aggrieved parties may have sufficient material to approach the court within the time allowed by law. Because within 14 days, the usual practice of INEC does not afford parties necessary documents and materials to approach the court within reasonable time.
Abdulkareem, thank you very much for giving us your time here inside our 3 p.m. bulletin. We'll continue to come to you for expert analysis. Thank you.